Hello and welcome to this video lecture for the University of Connecticut's online course, Classics and Ancient Mediterranean Studies 1103, Classical Mythology. I'm Roger Travis, Associate Professor of Classics at the University of Connecticut, and whether you're enrolled in this course or not, I hope you enjoy the lecture and learn something about new ways of looking at classics and at myth. Thanks for watching.
Moving on in this series of lectures about how Ovid uses mythology to take apart one of its key elements, that is humanism, we come to a section of the Metamorphoses that is marked out above all by the number of women in love and talking at great length about the way that their love is somehow a problem. And I'm going to use a word that has some connotations that are very negative in everyday speech, but which also has a technical and neutral definition that I want to use, and which is really the most appropriate word to use for this purpose, and that word is perversion. Again, the way that I'm going to use this word is value neutral, meaning I am not saying that anything that is perverted is bad. I need to use the word, though, because it's a word that has a very specific technical definition of practices that are different from what is considered to be normal. Note very carefully that what is considered to be normal changes greatly from culture to culture and from situation to situation. And so when I call something normal, I am most certainly not saying that it's good. I'm saying that it's what can be identified in that particular cultural situation as being what's expected. And so that which is perverted is something that violates that sense of what's expected and what's normal. As we saw early on in the introduction to Ovid, Ovid made his career before Metamorphoses with perversion, that is, erotic practices in the Amores and the Ars Amatoria that were in violation of what Augustus was trying to set up as normal for Rome. So Ovid has an established interest in perversion, and not just in perversion, but in perversion as a way of thinking about what's normal. That is, remember that he more or less tried to take love poetry apart through his perversion of conventional ways of looking at love elegy. And now he's doing the same thing with epic in the Metamorphoses. And in this section of the Metamorphoses that I'm talking about, the one that has all of those interior monologues, that is, speeches to themselves by these women who are in love with somebody that they think they probably shouldn't be in love with, he returns to that kind of initial interest in erotic perversion, that is, in love that is in violation of the norm. And this turns out to be a great way at getting at that problem of difficulties with humanism that he also got at with the figure of mythic guy and the way he takes apart the idea of the conquering hero with reference to Perseus. Because here he's going to take apart the idea of love with reference to these women who are in love with the wrong people. And so in this lecture I want to explore three different ways of understanding what he's doing with these unfortunate and mostly doomed loves. And that in turn is going to be a springboard into one love that is doomed but manages to survive its doom in a very interesting way that maybe presents Ovid's solution to the problem of what one is supposed to do about love in this world where, from one point of view, that is, in this case, Ovid's point of view, every love in itself is kind of a perversion. Every love is a violation of what's right and what's normal. And in particular, every love in Rome is that way. And this, in turn, as we move on through the lectures, is going to get us to the point where we can talk about what Ovid is specifically saying about the problem of Rome and humanism. And just to put that in a nutshell as a preview, Ovid wants to tell his audience that humans are in general bad, but that Romans are as bad as humans can possibly be because Romans think so much of themselves. And of course, the guy who thinks the very most of himself, as we'll see in Book 15, is Augustus. Meaning Augustus is actually, in the end, the worst person in the entire world. Now, there's a theme of perversion that runs through the entirety of the Metamorphoses that you can see from, say, the very beginning when you have Apollo chasing Daphne and then pretty much falling in love with a tree. But the perversion, as far as my reading of the Metamorphoses goes, starts getting really marked and emphatic around book 7 with a particular figure who is really, really important in Ovid's career, and that's the figure of Medea. And one of the things that I didn't tell you about Ovid's career as I was focusing on his transition to epic in the Metamorphoses is that he also loved tragedy. And his favorite work, if we're to believe him in his later writings, of all of his works was a tragedy of Medea that he wrote and which we unfortunately have lost. But we do know that he loved it, and we know that the figure of Medea was a very important one to him. And so when Medea comes in just about halfway through the Metamorphoses in book 7, and falls in love with Jason and has what's really the first of these long interior monologues by women who are in love with men that they consider to be the wrong men for them. It's a kind of signal moment, and it introduces Ovid's concern with this theme. What does it mean to have a perverted love? Again, remember, perverted in the technical sense. So we're at the beginning of book 7 in the Metamorphoses, and this is page 144 in Melville's translation. Here's Medea. "O vain," she cried, "Medea is your struggle. Some deity must thwart you. Strange if this, or something surely like, is not called love. Else why do my father's orders seem too harsh? Too harsh they are indeed. Why do I dread his death whose face I first have seen today? What cause, what reason for a fear so great? Thrust down the flames that burn your virgin heart, if you have strength. Such strength would be my cure. But against my will some force bewitches me. One way desire, another reason calls. The better course I see and do approve, the worse I follow. Why long thus for him, a princess for a stranger? Why admit wild thoughts of wedlock with an alien world? This land too offers what may win your love. Whether he live or die, the gods decide. Yet may he live. That prayer, though I loved not, were surely licit." Now there are two things that I want to take out of this passage. The first is what Ovid is, I think, doing with the audience's sympathies, with not only this interior monologue, but the interior monologues of the other love-raging women, women who are in love with the wrong person. The first part of that is that I think we are supposed to recognize that we all have felt this way. Despite the fact that the way Medea is putting this is over the top and very overwrought, and in that sense is distancing, nevertheless, we're supposed to see that we have had these same emotions. I mean, we all know what it is to be young and in love and to feel like you can't ever have the person that you want. I think Ovid depends on us recognizing that. And then at the same time, he also depends on us seeing the way that he puts it as over the top. And what it leads to is an ability that I think he wants to call up in us to look at ourselves as being like these characters, being kind of over the top in our own emotions, and being able both to laugh at and to kind of examine ourselves. And in the next segment, I'm going to take what Ovid is doing here with Medea further and look at it in light of the other interior monologues of women who are feeling these perverted desires.